Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects, round 22 in the can now. That means we have just 5 regular season rounds left until the season is done. We obviously have some exciting finals football coming up. And unfortunately, the Warriors might not win the comp this season, but hopefully we do have a new crown or a Penrith 4-peat. Either option I am not mad about. And so that leads me into my tips and predictions for round 23. But as always, before we do that, let's look back at last week. So last week we tipped 5 out of 8 games. Unfortunately, the Parramatta Eels broke their drought against the Warriors over here in Auckland, which was a bit of a shame. The Broncos couldn't keep their season alive against the Titans. And the poor old Storm couldn't keep their century-long record intact against the Saints, going down in Melbourne. Still running at nearly 60% for the season. A tough year for me personally, but thanks to all of you for sticking with me. Now, I'll tell you someone who isn't having a bad season, and that is Cornish Hua, who has extended his lead to 3 tips ahead of Manawatu Turbo in the race for those grand final tickets and some awesome prizes. Good luck to you, Cornish Hua, Manawatu Turbo, and everyone in that top 20. Still lots to play for over the next 5 weeks, so good luck with your tips. Here are my tips and predictions for round 23. Alright, round 23 gets underway on Thursday night with the 15th placed South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the first placed Melbourne Storm at Accor Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Bunnies, any chance of a berth in the finals this season was put to bed after losing to the Cronulla Sharks 20 points to 6. The Bunnies barely fired a shot against the Sharks, with Jai Gray the only player that looked threatening, with injuries to Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker really taking a toll on their attack. It's no secret this season has been a massive fall from grace for Souths, and all eyes now turn towards Wayne Bennett and a rebuild in 2025. Now, in terms of teams list for South Sydney this week, Cody Walker was excluded late with a calf injury and may be in doubt again this week. And as for the Storm, they suffered their first defeat to the St. George Illawarra Dragons in Melbourne this century, unable to pull it from the fire late, 18 points to 16. Melbourne were physically outmatched by the Saints' big pack and defensively conceded some soft tries, especially on their left edge. They made plenty of uncharacteristic errors, Harry Grant in particular, and it certainly felt like there was not much synergy between their star players when the game was on the line and the scoreboard pressure finally caught up with them. Now, in terms of teams list for Melbourne this week, Eli Katoa, he did leave the field with what looked to be a knee injury, but did return to finish the match, so I'd assume he will be named again this week. There's also a ton of potential ins for Melbourne this week with Tui Kamikamika, Christian Welch, Marion Seve, young Tonamapea, Joe Chan, all potential ins, as well as potentially Xavier Coates. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, Storm, they have a great record against the Rabbitohs. They've won 20 of the last 24 encounters. The live odds, thanks to our good friends over at SpinBet, do agree with the Storm at $1.18 and the Bunnies coming back at $5 even. The points line is currently 14.5. Pretty straightforward one for me to start this Thursday. I think the Melbourne Storm bounce back strong against a very rudderless South Sydney side. So for me, Melbourne 13+. Alright, moving now to the first of 2 games on Friday this week, starting first with the 11th placed Gold Coast Titans playing host to the 4th placed Cronulla Sharks at Cbus Super Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Titans, they recorded their biggest ever win against the Broncos and have now beaten them twice in one season, storming home to win 46 points to 18 in front of a record home crowd since 2008. Des Hasler's men weathered the storm early from Reece Walsh and the Broncos before their own star fullback Keanu Kenny showed he could be just as impactful. Despite spending 10 minutes in the bin, Kenny scored a try-double, set up 2 others and ran for over 250 metres in an outstanding show of speed and skill. Jojo Fafita also had his best game in Titans colours and was really strong on that right edge, bagging a hat-trick and setting up another 3 tries. They emphatically ended their rival's season, but more importantly kept their own slim chances alive. Now, in terms of teams list for the Titans this week, AJ Brimson said pre-game that he is eyeing a return within the next fortnight, so could be a chance to be named this week, but given their form, it is hard to see where he would fit into that side. And as for Cronulla, the Sharks were far from their best, but managed to pull away late to beat the South Sydney Rabbitohs 20 points to 6. Cronulla made a whopping 9 errors in that opening half and could only manage a 59% completion rate, with their outside backs coughing up possession regularly in yardage. To their credit though, they were able to turn it around in the second stint, with Trindle, Edo and Jesse Ramian taking control of the game and converting their chances into points, despite Casey Badger and Liam Kennedy doing their best NRL standard referee impression. Alright, looking at the teams list for the Sharks too, Braden Trindle, big loss. If he is out, he was taken from the field late with a tight hamstring. The Sharks did call it precautionary, but will require a scan. I mean, certainly if he is out, that certainly will test Cronulla's depth in the halves, with Nico obviously out for a wee while longer too. Some good news though is that try-scoring machine Tommy Hazelton is listed to return from a foot injury this week. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Titans, they snapped a 9-game losing streak to the Sharks earlier this season. The Sharks, they've also only tasted defeat at Cbus Super Stadium once since 2015. Ooh, this is a game. You've got the Titans, who obviously bested the Sharks earlier this season and have been on a bit of a run of recent weeks, whereas the poor old Sharks have been, far from their best, or at least far from the form they were in the opening 10 rounds of the season, and will obviously want revenge for their loss. But I'm going to back the home side here. I'm going to take the Titans 1-12. I really haven't seen the Sharks improve much since that game, whereas I have seen more improvement and more consistency, I guess, from the Titans. So for that reason, I am going to take the Gold Coast 1-12. Alright, and the final game on Friday has the 16th placed Parramatta Eels taking on the 2nd placed Penrith Panthers at CommBank Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Eels, they finally managed to snap their 8-week losing streak, beating the Warriors in Auckland 30 points to 20. Now, I will just start by saying maybe I am being a touch bitter, but I honestly didn't think the Eels looked that great overall, but they were certainly better than the Warriors. Clint Gutherson was obviously heavily involved at the back, and I did think that both Dejan Arce and Dylan Brown were really strong, as were their outside backs, and just something had to give for the Eels. It's just a shame it had to be against the Warriors. Now, in terms of teams list for Para, Mike Acevo and Kalma Tuolangi are both expected to be available for selection this week. And as for the Penrith Panthers, they were given a run for their money at home against the Newcastle Knights, but came out on top 22 points to 14. That game was pretty evenly matched for the full 80 minutes, with the Panthers having the better of the exchanges, but unable to find the last pass and convert their chances into points. Nathan Cleary ultimately proved to be the difference once again, scoring the match winner and almost recreating his grand final winning try in the process. Isaiah Iongi had a great debut, running for over 250 metres and producing some incredible defensive plays when the game was on the line. Penrith, they just keep churning out top quality youngsters, and he's just another perfect example of that. Now, in terms of teams list for Penrith this week, Dane Laurie may be able to return from his head knock, while James Fisher-Harris, Dylan Edwards and Paul Alamotti aren't due back for a few more weeks. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, it has been pretty even in recent times, with Parramatta winning 4 of the last 7 games between the two sides, but obviously not the one that counted in 2022. The Eels, though, they have won 3 of the last 4 games between the two clubs at CommBank. The live odds, thanks to our friends at SpinBet, have the Panthers at $1.17 favourites and the Eels bouncing back at $5 even. The points line, the biggest of the week, at 16.5. Fairly straightforward one for me here. I know the Parramatta Eels finally broke their drought last week, but unfortunately that was a one and done for Para, with the Panthers surely due for a big response. Penrith 13+. Alright, moving now to Super Saturday. 3 games on Super Saturday this week, and the first of the 3 games has the 10th placed Canberra Raiders taking on the 7th placed Manly Sea Eagles at GIO Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Raiders, they couldn't celebrate Josh Papali's 300th game with the win, almost though upsetting the Dogs at Belmore 22 points to 18. Ricky's men showed a ton of fight to get themselves back into that game in hostile territory, with both Joseph Tapani and Josh Papali'i putting up big numbers through the middle of the park and Jordan Rapana scrapping for every inch. The Raiders, they are certainly one of those teams that I love to give a bit of stick to, but man, I have got to give them a massive rap and a ton of credit. They played really, really well last night and certainly could have won that game if not for some incredible moments from Stephen Crichton. So big shout out to the Raiders. They certainly didn't play bad, they just lost to a better side on the night. Now, in terms of teams list for Canberra, Morgan Smithies, he left the field late against the Bulldogs, and coach Ricky Stewart said he will be unavailable this week given the severity of his concussion. And as for the Manly Sea Eagles, they had the bye last week, but the week prior almost produced a remarkable comeback win against the Sydney Roosters, coming up short 34 points to 30. Manly certainly have showed a ton of resilience after being dealt once again a ton of adversity through injuries and HIAs, but in the end the scoreline probably flattered them, with over half of their points coming through intercepts. The Sea Eagles' heart has been really, really impressive this season. They have played a ton of games now with big injuries and suspension tolls, but they've never given up on themselves, and that's certainly why they are entrenched in the top 8. Speaking of Manly's injuries, if we take a look at the teams list, Ruben Garrick and Jason Saab have undergone their concussion protocol, so should be okay to return if they are symptom-free. Big Hamoli Olakawatu returns from his 2-game suspension following his involvement in the Origin 3 scuffle. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, it has been evenly matched in recent meetings, but Manly, they have won 6 of the last 9. Since 2015 though, they've gone win-loss, win-loss, win-loss at GIO Stadium, so based on that pattern, the Raiders are due for a win this week. The live odds, thanks to our friends at Spinbet, have the Sea Eagles at $1.62 favourites, and the Raiders bouncing back at $2.30. The points line is currently 3.5. Another really interesting game this week. Obviously, both sides wanting to entrench and I guess prove to not only themselves but to their haters or their doubters that they are worthy of a berth in the top 8. And what better way to do that than by beating the teams around you on the ladder. I do like Manly here though. I think obviously coming off the bye they will be well rested. If they do have a full contingent with the likes of Garrick, Saab, Olakauatu, I really do think on paper they should have too much class for the Raiders. But given the Raiders' effort against the Dogs, I do think it'll be close. So I'm going to go Manly 1-12 in a very, very tight one, potentially even a DCE field goal. Alright, moving now to the second game on Super Saturday. We have the 6th placed North Queensland Cowboys taking on the 14th placed Brisbane Broncos at Queensland Country Bank Stadium for another Queensland Derby. Alright, starting first with the Cows, they were far from clinical against an undermanned Tigers outfit, but did enough to remain in the top 8, 48 points to 30. The Cowboys certainly had some incredible moments on attack, but with a one-man advantage for almost the entire second half, their defence, or lack thereof, really allowed the Tigers back into the contest and gave them a bit of a scare down the stretch. Pretty concerning signs from the Cowboys in my opinion, to concede 30 points against a 12-man Tigers side, and personally if I was a Cowboys fan there wasn't too much to be proud of in that game, and coach Todd Payton certainly shared that sentiment in the post-game press conference. In terms of teams list though, Jake Granville suffered what is believed to be a pec injury and will be in doubt with potentially this week but also the rest of the season, which is a massive blow given what a servant he's been to the Cowboys club. Helam Lukey and Ruben Cotter, they are both subject to the NRL's concussion protocols, so may also be excluded again this week. And as for the poor old Broncos, their season is officially over after suffering their biggest ever defeat to the Gold Coast Titans, 46 points to 18. The Broncos needed to start fast, and they certainly did, with Reece Walsh producing some incredible moments to give his side an 8-point lead at half-time, but lost some key personnel in Payne Haas and Ezra Mam in the process. Despite their season being on the line, the Broncos were completely blown off the park in the second half, with errors and a complete lack of desire, especially defensively, putting the final nail in the Broncos' 2024 coffin, which concludes a massive fall from grace from last year's grand finalists. Now, in terms of teams list for the Broncos this week, Payne Haas, he obviously suffered a season-ending Liz Frank injury and won't return. Ezra Mam, he did leave the field with an ankle injury, and he even tried to come back on at halftime, but to no avail, so he could be in doubt this week. We'll have to wait for teams list on Tuesday, but certainly a massive blow if he is unavailable this week. And looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Broncos have won the last 3 games against the Cowboys. The Cowboys, though, they have a great record against the Broncos in Townsville, winning 8 of their last 12 meetings. The live odds, thanks to our friends over at Spinbet, currently have the Cowboys at $1.50 favourites, with the Broncos coming back at $2.60. The points line is currently 6.5 points. Man, on paper this should be a cracking game, but I really don't think the Broncos can get up for it. I think they've had multiple chances with their season on the line to show some desire, to show some energy, to show some fight, and they haven't done that. So in what world would they want to do it this week now that their hopes of playing in the finals are over? I think the Cowboys win, but I do think given their shaky defense, the Broncos score plenty of points too. So I am just going to take the Cowboys here by 1-12. Alright, and the final game of Super Saturday should be an absolute cracker, with the 8th placed St. George Illawarra Dragons taking on the 5th placed Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs at Net Strata. Man, the battle of the 2 most improved sides in 2024. Alright, starting first with the Dragons, they recorded their first ever win against the Storm in Melbourne since 1999, beating the competition leaders 18 points to 16. The Saints made the most of their pack's physicality, really taking it to the Storm's middles and imposing themselves on the edges. Ben Hunt made up for an uncharacteristic performance the week prior, spearheading the Dragons' attack with 2 try assists, 100 run meters, and 460 kicking meters. Defensively, I thought St. George were really solid, especially in that second half, managing to turn away Melbourne's attack, especially down the stretch with Munster, Hughes, Pappenhausen and Grant throwing everything they had at them. A great result for the club, for Flano, and for all Dragons supporters. A very, very impressive result given the history there. Now, in terms of teams list for the Dragons, given the result and no new injuries, I expect Shane Flanagan to wheel out the same 17 again this week. And as for Canterbury, the Dogs' train continued to roll towards the top 4 station, beating a game Raiders side in front of a sold-out crowd at Belmore, 22 points to 18. Canterbury's attack certainly wasn't as dynamic as it was against the Broncos the week prior, but some inspiring moments from Stephen Crichton got them across the line. Despite not having the best night defensively, I thought both Matt Burton and Toby Sexton were really, really strong defensively, and the Dogs' smaller middle forwards really held their gloves up to the Raiders' formidable forwards. They're now the best defensive team in the competition, I do believe, and utterly deserving of their place in the top 5 and soon to be top 4 in my opinion. Alright, in terms of teams list for the Doggies, Josh Curran suffered an AC joint injury but returned to the field, so he'll likely play again this week. We'll probably need a few needles pre-game. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, it has been evenly matched in recent times with 5 wins apiece in the last 10. The live odds, thanks to the legends at Spinbet, you should check them out by scanning that QR code, currently have the Bulldogs as $1.65 favourites and the Dragons bouncing back at $2.25. The points line is currently 3.5. Again, as I said off the top, this will be a cracking game. Obviously, both sides are easily the two most improved in the competition this season, and they go up against each other competing for not only positions in the top 8, but even the top 4, right? So a lot on the line for both sides. And especially after both sides have put off some remarkable results last week and the week prior for the Doggies. But I do think defence wins comps, defence wins games, and the team that has shown the most improvement defensively this season is easily the Dogs. And if they can turn their attack on, they should go a long way this season, potentially to a prelim, maybe even the grand final. So I'm big on the Dogs this season. So for me, the Doggies get it done in enemy territory, but just by 1 to 12 points. Alright, moving now to the first of 2 games on Sunday this week. Starting first with the 9th placed Dolphins hosting the 13th placed NZ Warriors at Suncorp Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Dolphins, they suffered their 3rd consecutive loss and slipped out of the top 8, getting outpointed by the Sydney Roosters in Perth, 40 points to 34. It was a highly entertaining game with over 70 combined points and a perfect 11 from 11 conversions, with both sides going try for try in an attempt to outpoint the other. Max Plath was really strong at dummy half, as were both centres Jake Averillo and Herbie Farnworth, and if the Finns were playing any other side than the Roosters, I think they probably would have won, as attack certainly isn't their weakness. Every game from here on out is now must win if the Dolphins want to play finals for the first time, and they very urgently need to stop this current slide. In terms of teams list for the Finns, Tavita Pangai Jr. and Jermaine Isako are both under injury clouds this week, while Cody Nikorima is expected to return from illness. And as for the Warriors, their 2024 campaign is officially over after suffering an embarrassing loss to the Parramatta Eels at home, 30 points to 22. The Warriors had all the possession early and didn't allow the Eels to play the ball inside their own half for the first 20 minutes, but really lacked any threat or energy on attack outside of the final 10 minutes of the game, when it was too little, too late. I feel like I've been saying the same thing for weeks now, but I'll say it again. The Warriors are consistently given such a strong platform from their big middle men, the likes of Barnett and Adam Fanua-Blake, but are desperately lacking any threat in their halves and outside backs, often opting for nothing chip kicks on the 5th play and 1-out runs. It is so frustrating to watch, probably not even just as a Warriors fan, but in general, when that side certainly has some big name players who should be able to conjure up some more attacking shape. Now, in terms of teams list for the Wars this week, Dylan Walker will be unavailable this week after succumbing to an HIA. Good news, though, is Marcelo Montoya is listed to return from a groin injury. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, this is only the 4th time they will have met, but the Finns, they have never lost to the Warriors at Suncorp, while the Warriors have won both of the home games. The live odds currently have the Dolphins at $1.40 favourites, with the Warriors bouncing back at a near-perfect $3 mark. The line is currently 7.5 points. It pains me to say it, guys, but I'm going to tip the Finns this week by 1 to 12 points. The Warriors had everything to play for, much like the Broncos last week. Everything to play for, and they dished that up. Unfortunately, I think the Finns have more to play for, and in front of their home fans at Suncorp should be too strong. So I do think the Dolphins win by 1 to 12 points. And the final game of round 23 should be an absolute barn burner with 2 attacking juggernauts, the 12th placed Newcastle Knights taking on the last placed West Tigers at McDonald Jones Stadium. Starting first with the Knights almost produced yet another upset last week, pushing the Panthers to the final whistle but ultimately coming up short 22 points to 14. Newcastle were right up for that challenge defensively, but once again lacked a ton of threat on attack, with Kalen Ponga having limited opportunities and their halves not offering a ton on their fifth play options. I did think though that their middles were really strong, the likes of Saifiti and Thompson, and were a big reason why the Knights were competitive for as long as they were. Now, in terms of teams list for the Knights, Jacob Saifiti suffered a calf injury and apparently was walking around on crutches after the game, which isn't a good sign, so will certainly be unavailable this weekend. And as for the Tigers, their ill discipline once again cost them big time, losing both Justin Olam and the game against the Cowboys 48 points to 30. West started really strong with Lockie Galvin getting plenty of early touches and having a ton of success on the left edge, combining with Samuel Alafainu. The poor old Tigers though were right in that game at 14 points to 20 until Justin Olam was red carded for a forceful high tackle on Heathen Maluki, which completely changed the game. Despite Dream Buller racking up an impressive 2 tries with 259 running meters and 9 tackle breaks, the Tigers couldn't overcome the adversity. In terms of teams list for the West Tigers this week, Justin Olam has been served a 3-game suspension. Alex Twal and Alex Fainu both weren't able to finish the game and will be in doubt again this week with head knocks. Good news though is that both Aiden Caesar and Luke Laulili should return to the fold this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Knights, they have won 5 straight against the Tigers. They've also won 3 of the last 4 games at McDonald Jones Stadium. The live odds currently have the Knights as $1.33 favourites and the Tigers coming back at $3.35. The points line is 9.5. Look, I certainly haven't had the best tipping season to this point, so there's not much more for me to tip conservatively with. So I am going to take the Tigers here, 1 to 12 points. I did tip the Tigers against the Knights earlier this season and they let me down in that game, but I really did like some of those early signs from the Tigers last week, the likes of Galvin, Buller, Fainu. There's lots of signs of life there, and if they can field 17 men for the full 80 minutes, they might go a lot better at winning games. So for me, I'm just going to do it. Tigers 1 to 12. Bugger it, the season's done. Alright, just like that, we're done. Thank you as always for watching. I really do appreciate all of the support. It's great to see. Let me know who you're tipping in the comments below. Join our Discord, check out our Patreon, all of that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.